This. Hello, welcome to Raw and Unedited, the place where association executives like you receive innovation, insight, solutions, all to make you a more effective leader. Have you ever thought, could you be guilty of violating your organization's ethics policies and not even know it? How about your staff? How about your volunteer leaders? How about your members? Well, here to help us with this is Dr. Bruce Weinstein. He is the ethics guy, and all over the television, all over the internet, through his books, he is the guy. So Bruce, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Great to be here, Ed. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely. So you talk in your materials about high character leadership. What does that mean?
To be a high character leader is to act with integrity every step of the way. And what I've discovered, Ed, is that when I speak to associations and I use the word ethics, I've noticed that it's sometimes off-putting because, well, let me ask you, when you see the word ethics in the news, what is it usually linked to, the word ethics?
It's usually linked to somebody screwing somebody, doing something wrong.
That's right. The word that usually comes along with ethics or ethical is violation. So ethics in the news, whether it's about association leadership or business leadership or leadership in education, usually is about people making the wrong choices, untrustworthy choices, choices that lack integrity. So it's not surprising that the word ethics is about as appealing to association leaders, many association leaders, as dental surgery.
Sure.
So instead of the word ethics, I've been using high character leadership to really speak to the same ideas, but it seems to be a much more engaging concept because we like to think of ourselves as ethical, but I think when we talk about high character leadership, it's aspirational. You know, I'd like to be that kind of person. I'm good and I can be even better. And that's what focusing on high character leadership is about. So I've identified 10 crucial qualities of high character leaders. And when I speak with associations, I talk about how honesty, accountability, care, courage, fairness, and 5 other qualities are directly responsible for the success of the association. A direct link between high character leadership and financial and all other kinds of success.
Let's take that, let's bring that home for the association executives. Okay, so you are a chief staff executive, which means you're either the CEO or executive director, whatever it is. So you're the chief staff executive, top paid person, and you are enjoying a reasonable salary, and you see that your board's doing something that might be unethical, might be illegal, and you're sitting here as the chief staff executive of an association or society going, ooh, I really want to keep my job, and I really want to keep these folks safe. What do I do? How does a person think their way through that?
So the first step in making ethical decisions is getting the facts. So I would ask you, when you talk about a board member maybe doing something unethical or illegal, can we talk about a specific example of that?
Well, here's one of the ones that a lot of associations are dealing with. If a board member starts bringing up an antitrust discussion, an antitrust violation discussion, and starts talking, something like, well, we've got these vendors, yada, 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 and XYZ vendor, they're making our industry look bad. And as soon as they say something like, well, we should consider boycotting that vendor, now we just got into an antitrust violation.
Right. So why would the head of an association be reluctant to say to the board member, we can't discuss that, we can't talk about that, we can't do that? Why might he or she be reluctant to talk about that?
He or she, the chief staff executive, would more than likely say, we could be getting into an ethical, into a antitrust situation here. We really can't talk about this. But this board member happens to be, Joe Blow, who's the big, powerful person on the board.
Now we're getting somewhere.
Who everybody knows, everybody cows down to, and Joe Blow goes, well, I don't really care. I'm going to talk about it.
So in other words, if this VIP board member didn't have that social position, the association leader would have no qualms in saying, we can't discuss that, we can't do that. Is that what you're saying?
Probably.
Right. So then the question is, to whom is the leader of an association ultimately loyal to? Is it to a VIP board member and wanting to avoid ruffling his or her feathers, or is it to the membership and to the community at large? To whom does the leader ultimately have allegiance?
Well, I don't know allegiance, but I will say legally within association law, the board of directors hires and fires the chief staff executive. So he or she, works at their leisure. So the challenge becomes if board member A, big man in town, decides to create all kinds of grief and
Yes.
get people on board. Oh, let's get rid of the executive director. He, she, they're just not. They don't understand our industry.
Aha. So the conflict then seems to be, should I preserve my job at all costs, or should I do what I know is the right thing, which is to shut this conversation down and to say directly, in a respectful way, but firmly and directly, what you're talking about is a possible antitrust violation, and we cannot do that. So again, I ask, to whom does the association leader ultimately have allegiance or loyalty? Is it to protecting his or her job, or is it to upholding the ethical standards of association leadership by stepping up to the plate, the way you would do if it weren't a VIP member of the board suggesting that? I mean, when I lay it out that way, it seems pretty obvious that your own interest in preserving your job can't be paramount. They cannot be paramount.
Oh, absolutely. And unfortunately, so frequently we see that's the case.
Well, and that's why, quite frankly, I have a job, because if everybody did the right thing at all times, I'd have to be doing something other than talking about high character leadership. But the thing is, it's actually, so looking at this is a great example. It's actually in the association leader's own interest to do the right thing in the long run, because let's say that he or she got fired for the wrong reasons. For one thing, would you really want to be working with such a board to begin with? But secondly, when the word gets out to the public, as it very well may, how does it look on your own, in terms of your own reputation as an association leader, to have made a choice strictly out of self-interest? That's the worst possible PR that you could hope for.
I would think so. Yeah.
Right. And so in the long run, acting out of self-interest and doing the right thing are the same thing in the long run. That's what I try to emphasize, that there's not really a tension between protecting yourself and doing the right thing if you take a long range view.
Let me twist here a little bit and make a little turn on you. I'm telling you, I'm going to make a turn. So, which will probably date this video that we're recording right now. But right now, this year, there's the whole hashtag Me Too movement.
Yes.
And a lot of people are very concerned. And I am seeing associations, and I will be careful with my terms here, but I've seen associations are creating policies in a hasty manner that are, number one, written very poorly, number two, written so broadly that it's almost like they're trying to give a certain group a tax deduction, but because Congress did it so bad, they give an unintended group the same tax deduction. So if I'm an association executive and my board's going crazy, let's just say you got the officers, the president, vice president, president-elect, whatever, treasurer, secretary. Sometimes they call that the executive committee. And these folks are just going bananas. Oh, we got to have a policy, and they put something together and vote on it that the executive director knows is a bad move. What does the executive director do?
I think the crux of your question really came early on when you said the policy was written in haste, because ethical leaders, high character leaders, the best leaders don't take a short range view. They look at the long term and they say, look, we could do it quickly or we could get it right. And it's the same, quite frankly, it's the same kind of dilemma that journalists face. Do we want to be the first to break the story, or do we want to make sure that we have the facts right so that when we go out with this, we're actually reporting the truth rather than what we've heard?
Yeah.
It's really the same kind of situation. And smart leaders, high character leaders say, wait a minute, I understand there's this social pressure to write a policy like this, but we have to get it right, and that might mean taking some time. And
Makes
that also
sense.
takes courage. It takes
Yes.
courage to, right? It takes courage to say, wait a minute, slow down. Let's take a good look at what's going on. That's high character leadership.
Sure. Well, in looking at that, you talk about organizations, whether they should hire for competence
Yes.
or hire for character. And looking at your, uh, a lot of trade associations and professional societies, some are small staff, 2, 3, 4 people. Some are very large staff, 200, 300 people. And so it, you talk about which is more important, character or competence.
Mhm.
Why do you put that out there the way you do?
I spent a couple of years interviewing association leaders and others to find out why it is that so often we hear the leadership say we hire for competence and fire for character. Wouldn't it make more sense to hire for competence and character? I mean, if you're going to find out down, a year or two down the road that someone is fundamentally dishonest or lacks courage or isn't fair or loses his or her stack at the shortest provocation, this is not someone you want on your team. So why not interview people on the basis not just of their knowledge and skills, but also their character? And I heard lots of different reasons as to why associations don't hire for high character leadership. One, which is horrible, and thinking about it from a dating perspective, you can understand why this is horrible. Well, we just want to assume that someone is honest. This is a dangerous assumption, an assumption that leadership at associations cannot afford to make, because would you say that, let's say, Ed, 5 or 10 dishonest association leaders or members of the leadership team, 5 or 10 of them could do serious damage to an association's reputation? Could it take only 5 or 10 to do that?
It could take only 1 or 2.
It could take only one. So it makes absolutely no sense to hire strictly for competence. And, it's striking because I'm about to speak to an association now about high character leadership. And one of the things I want to tell the leadership when I meet them
Mhm.
is that nowhere on their website do they have anything with respect to their values. Now, look, values are just words, and you have to walk the talk if you really want to be seen as an association, a high character association. But it starts with that. So first of all, smart associations make clear to the public, make clear to their memberships, this is what we stand for, and it's on the homepage, and it's on a tab on the top of the homepage of the website, so that everybody can see what you stand for. But it doesn't end there. When you look at job descriptions, even associations that publicize their values, publicize their mission, their vision statement, their code of conduct, make it easy for everyone to see, when you look at the job descriptions, there is a yawning gap between what the association says it values and what it actually values based on what they're looking for in their job descriptions. Makes absolutely no sense. And so, I mean, one of the downsides, I think, in the presentations that I give is that people leave with a to-do list, because the first thing they have to do when they get back is make sure that job descriptions include references to character. It's not enough to be knowledgeable or skilled in, say, mechanical contracting. You have to be honest. You have to be accountable. You have to be willing to say, I made a mistake, and to make good on that. And why not include that in the job description and talk about that at the interview? That's
Yeah,
smart leadership.
as I'm listening to you, and I'm wearing my association executive hat uh, rather than my interviewer hat. I'm thinking, okay, well, Bruce, that sounds good, but I'm not a SHRM specialist, HR. The federal government has got so many regulations, as does the state governments, that I don't believe I can ask those kinds of questions in an interview.
Yes, this is, I've heard this when I've interviewed people for my Forbes column, Profiles in High Character Leadership. I ask CHROs exactly that question, and I sometimes get that response. But for one thing, it is possible to quantify high character leadership. You can use detailed stories to find out about a person's commitment to high character and the direct relationship between a person's honesty and his or her success. But the thing is, these are not complicated questions. Like if I were to say to you, Ed, tell me about a time
Mhm.
when you had to tell an uncomfortable truth to someone in a position of power or authority over you. What was the situation? How did you find the courage to speak up, and what was the result? That story, assuming that you have one, and you probably do, will reveal your commitment to honesty and courage. So that's a very straightforward question to ask, and it
Got it.
does not run afoul of any laws or
Okay.
regulations.
Okay. I
It's just that we don't think to ask
Yeah.
questions like that
Got it.
until it's too late.
So association executives, and when you said detailed story, that's what you're talking about.
Yes,
Is
story, right. Because some, unfortunately, sociopaths are pretty good at lying. So you're not going to be able to catch everybody. But the point is not to completely eliminate hiring people of low character, but to increase the likelihood of getting honest and accountable people on board. And it is absolutely positively possible to do that. The long-term goal for association leadership is to hire and promote only high character people and to let the rest go. Because it doesn't matter how much you know or how skilled you are, if you're dishonest, if you're willing to fudge data, if you're willing to be cowardly when you need to step up to the plate, no association needs such a person. You don't.
Okay, you sold me on that. So now let's take it a step further. Um, I'm with you. Got it. What about me as the association executive in dealing with, well, number one, members that join my
Yes.
association or society. Number two, people that get into various levels of volunteer leadership.
Yes.
And
Yes.
number three, the person that becomes the chief elected officer or president, chair,
Yes.
whatever they call them. How,
So let's
how do
look
I
at the
deal with that?
membership first,
Okay.
because the thing is, if you have a member who's willing to steal intellectual property in his or her work, that reflects not just poorly, not just on the member, him or herself, but the association as such. And so the thing is, associations do have codes of conduct for their members, but they're rarely enforced. And so there has to be some kind of consequence to members who violate the code of conduct of the association. So that if you're discovered to have used stolen intellectual property in your own presentations, for example, that should be punishable somehow. I'm not saying they should be exiled to Alcatraz, but there has to be some kind of consequence to knowingly taking somebody else's property and claiming it as your own, or taking it when you should have known better. I can't tell you how often I'll ask someone after presentation, privately, of course, because I don't want to embarrass people, where did you get that image from The Godfather? Oh, I found it on the internet. Well, Paramount Pictures and Francis Ford Coppola and Al Pacino worked really hard to create the greatest American film ever made, according to many, including your humble correspondent. And it is not right. It's not just illegal, but it's unethical to take that without their permission.
And
There's, there should
that's
be
done
no
all the
argument,
time.
right? It happens all the time. You'll walk into a presentation and you hear somebody playing a Bruce Springsteen song. Did you clear that with Bruce? Did you clear that with Columbia Records? No. I mean, and often here's what the response is. How's anybody going to find out? That should not be the standard, whether someone's going to find out. What the book I wrote for kids is called, Is It Still Cheating If I Don't Get Caught? And I hope that people understand the answer is yes, it is still cheating if you don't get caught. I mean, this is not really complicated. It's just dismaying to me how common this practice is. Doesn't it bother you?
It does, and you made me think about. For a lot of years, I was a soccer United States Soccer Federation referee, and also my children were in soccer, and I never forget in one game, there was a dad, and he was, I forgot exactly what it was, telling his kid to do something he shouldn't do, and the dad goes, well, if you're not cheating, you're not trying.
What?
And I'm like, wow, wow, wow.
Wait a minute. The father said this to you?
Yeah, yeah.
And what was your response to the father?
I can't remember exactly what it was, but I was dumbfounded. I said, "Really? Are you kidding?" And especially as a referee,
Yes,
I'm
yes,
the one that's not in that particular game, but in some other game, I'm the one that's having to deal with those situations. But
yes.
yeah, it's fascinating. I don't want to know if I should say fascinating or if I should say sad, but so much of what I've seen over the last 20 years in how our youth are being raised. It's almost like the baby boomer generation
Yes.
pretty much gave their kids permission to lie, cheat, and steal.
Let's get back to the father with the strange vision
Oh
of
yeah,
winning.
yeah.
I'll bet if the other team had won through cheating, this father would be raising a huge stink about that, right?
Oh, no question.
So why is it wrong only if you're on the receiving end of the injustice as opposed to the perpetrator? And one of the things I wonder about in those situations, first of all, it often takes us off guard when someone is just so flagrant about being unethical as this father was. So it's hard to know how to respond to that.
That's true.
And that's why I like to train associations in knowing how to deal with these situations before they come up, so you develop a kind of muscle memory so that you practice how to respond to sticky situations like that. And the thing is, there are ways of calling it to the person's attention without saying, you ought to know better, and, shaking our finger, and who do you think you are? And what kind of a role model? The defenses go up. Nobody would pay attention to that. But
What's one of the ways?
I use this strategy called the praise sandwich. And it almost always works because it begins with something praising, flattering, that's sincere, such as, I understand, I'm a father too, and I understand how difficult it is to win sometimes, especially when the opposition may not be acting on the up and up. Now, here comes a criticism. I wonder, though, if I rise to the challenge and do the right thing, if that might inspire other people to do that. That's the criticism, but it doesn't sound like criticism because we're not using you language. We're not saying you ought to know better. You're making yourself the focus of the criticism, and it doesn't even feel or sound like criticism. I wonder what might happen if. And then you end with something positive and inspiring, like, thank you for being honest and sharing your concerns with me. I hope you'll think about what we just talked about. Praise, criticism, praise. It's a
Got it.
very powerful way of confronting troublesome behavior like this without adopting a scorched earth policy, which almost never works.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's great because I mean, let's face it. Every association executive watching this has had or is going to have a very similar situation
Yes.
where either volunteer leaders or whoever, just think it's totally appropriate to lie, cheat, and steal.
So wait,
And
but can we go to the volunteer piece, because it's just as important to have high character volunteers as it is high character members and high character leaders and staff. So when you're interviewing people, I mean, usually there's a committee or a subcommittee that interviews volunteers for an association, right? Just as there is at
well,
the
it depends. I mean, there's we'll take a little turn here real quick, and I'll make it a very quick turn. There's two basic ways that volunteer leaders become volunteer leaders. One is through a democratic election within the organization. Two is by, some people call it a cabal, where a very few number of people really have the say in selecting, okay, we're going to have call for nominations, we're going to filter, we're going to put it up for vote, but people either get to vote yay or nay. They don't get to choose who to vote for. Um, I find personally the first the best, a democratic election, but not all organizations
yes.
do it that way.
The
So
thing is, though, however it's done, however volunteers are brought into the organization, there is some description of what he or she is expected to do, right?
generally, not all, but a good number of associations will have in their bylaws. If they don't have it in their bylaws, they'll have it in their policy and procedures, job descriptions.
Aha! We're back to job description. So why not, let's say that you're hiring a volunteer to be director of communications and marketing. Why not say in that job description, your responsibilities will be to send 5 monthly emails to members, to work on the newsletter with the president, and to create handouts for our guest speakers. In addition to that, we expect you to walk the talk, to keep your promises, not to make promises that you're not prepared to keep, to have a timely delivery of the materials that we're relying upon you. In other words, again, to incorporate the language of high character into the job description, even for volunteers, because if you bring on one volunteer who isn't accountable, who doesn't keep his or her promises, is consistently late with deadlines, that doesn't serve the association well at all.
No, and taking that with what you're just saying, one of the things that I find a lot of association executives I work with complain heavily about board members that don't fulfill their responsibility.
Absolutely. We
Not
all know
just their
that. That's right.
not just their fiduciary responsibility, but just their basic strategy and tactics
Yes.
duty. And I've recommended scorecards and various other things, but it's a huge problem for association executives to, and maybe you can address this for us, to deal with. We've got board member A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and board member E and board member G are habitual about not doing what they say they're going to do.
That's right.
Habitual about not making either board meetings or making it to the calls,
Yes.
and then habitual when they are there about bitching, moaning, complaining about everybody else.
So the thing is, when you make character as well as competence one of the two criteria for, say, coming onto the board, that will scare some people off.
Yeah.
People who don't care much about keeping deadlines, for example, doing what they say they're going to do, when they see that that's expected of them, they might, and in fact, this has happened a lot, certainly in the commercial world, that will scare some people away, and they'll say, you know what, gosh, if I'm going to be held accountable for these things, this isn't the organization for me. It cuts them off at the pass.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But it's much easier to do that than dealing with them once they're on the board and getting rid of them. Much harder, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of association execs will hear from their volunteer leaders at the top levels. Well, geez, we're having a hard time getting people to serve on the board, so we got to take what we can get. That's A. And then B, when they do get on the board, you constantly hear, well, I have a day job. I'm just a volunteer.
Right. Now, let's go back to the this is the best we can get. If you're thinking about getting married, would you say, well, this person really has all these flaws and shortcomings, but he or she is the best I can get. I'll go ahead and marry this person. If you say that,
only
it's
if name was only.
Why would you say that bringing someone into the board? Makes no sense. Makes no sense.
Only if my name was Louis. Remember the song, Louis?
Yes.
You remember?
Right. That was, well, and speaking of high character, that was the theme song for Louis C.K.'s FX show.
Oh, geez.
It's been canceled.
Oh, that's too
for
funny.
Character reasons.
Well,
but that's another discussion.
Yeah, this is a wonderful discussion, Bruce, because association execs everywhere. Daily they're dealing with these issues.
These are character issues, right? They're character issues.
Yeah.
And it
doesn't get discussed
as it does you. Why are we not discussing this on a regular basis, out in the open, in all of our materials? Why is this swept under the rug or not even put on the radar? I guess that's how I see my international mission, is to just make this something that people think about. Just start by thinking about it.
Yeah. So what, you said an international mission. What makes you so passionate about high character leaderships? Why are you just bouncing off your seat about this?
I guess I have to say, I think I'm fueled largely by anger, because I see so many people taking the low road, and I know in my own life when I've done that, how disastrous it's been. And it takes just as much energy to be honest, to be accountable, to keep your promises, as it does to be dishonest and to skirt your responsibilities. And so it just seems to me like there are all these great opportunities for us to be high character leaders, to bring out the best in others. And why are we not taking these opportunities more often to do the right thing, to hire high character people? It seems to me like this, for one thing, high character people at an organization are often the organization's best kept secret. And so one of the things that I like to do is to find the stories of the high character leaders in associations, for example, and bring them out in the open, make these public knowledge, make this not the best kept secret, but the most well publicized stories associated with this particular organization. This should be part of a PR campaign. This should be part of recruiting new members. Look at what you'll get. I know you talk a lot, Ed, about the ROI of association membership. What if one of the things you'll get is being associated with an organization that is so committed to doing the right thing, we actually choose our members on that basis.
Sure.
What a radical! Wouldn't you want to be a part of an organization that has that as part of its mission? I would.
Yeah. Well, let me shift just a smidge here. So we've been talking predominantly about ethics for the association leaders, and ethics. Let me restate: ethics for the chief staff executive, their staff, their volunteer leaders. But let's shift here. Associations and societies are nothing more than really a gathering of business people or professionals,
Yes.
and good associations, they focus on understanding what are the problems of their members' customers or their members' clients. So let's take this when you're in an association and doing a keynote, not working with the volunteer leaders, but actually just doing a keynote for their rank and file members. What are the kinds of things that you're hearing from the members that are their challenges
Yes.
to help association executives better understand the challenges of their members?
One question that comes up a lot, and that's a great question. One thing that I hear a lot is, I'm a good person, the people here are fundamentally good, and yet sometimes we still struggle with doing the right thing. So what gets in the way? What are some of the common obstacles to doing the right thing? We want to do the right thing, and sometimes we're prevented. What is that? What are those obstacles? And by identifying them, maybe we can overcome them. And so this is one of the things I talk about a lot. Um, you know what? Being in a bad mood is a huge, can be a huge compromise to our ability to do the right thing, because it's much easier to be nasty to people, to take the low road, to
Sure.
maybe not go the extra mile. But earlier today, actually, I encountered a situation in which um, sometimes it just takes more time and effort to do the right thing. I mean, I was walking down Broadway. I'm here in New York City. I was walking down Broadway, and after 9/11, we saw signs everywhere that still remain in the city. If you see something, do something. Well, I saw a briefcase just sitting on the street, unattended, 52nd Street and Broadway. And I waited a while because I thought, this is really unusual in New York to see just a briefcase. It looked like a nice briefcase just
Mhm.
standing there with no one around it. So I waited and waited. No one claimed it. So I thought, I have to find a police officer. Well, I looked all over. It took me 8 blocks walking south out of my way to find a police officer just to tell the situation to. And what do you think he said when I explained the situation?
He probably said, "Yeah, don't worry about it."
He said, well, if you're at 52nd Street, that's that's another precinct. That's not my precinct. And he basically, and I have to, maybe I've seen the Shawshank Redemption too many times, but my biggest fear is to be incarcerated, especially for no good reason. And so I thought, well, I can either risk being incarcerated and speak up to the guy or just forget about it. But I thought, no, I just have to find a way to say to this fella, no, sir, I think this is your responsibility. And that's exactly what I said. And so he looked at me like I'm the bad guy. I don't know if you saw that movie Falling Down with Michael Douglas, where at the end of the movie he says, wait, I'm the bad guy? He looked at me like, why are you trying to ruin my day? So he got on his walkie-talkie, he connected to the precinct. Presumably someone investigated it and found out that it was an innocent thing. But I thought, I can't live with myself if, God forbid, there really is a problem here that I could have prevented, a problem that I could have prevented and just chose to do nothing. So getting back to your question about what questions do I get asked by association members, what gets in the way of doing the right thing, and I understand the time and effort it takes to speak up, to do the right thing, to go out on a limb.
Mhm.
I understand why it's just easier to forget about it, but that's just not being the best leader that we can be.
Got it. Got it. Um, so, so you say that time gets in the way of us doing the right thing. Um, is it time? Is it laziness? Is it fear? What do you think it really is?
Fear often gets in the way. In fact, the very first case study that we talked about was the one in which an association leader is reluctant to speak up to a VIP board member because the leader doesn't want to ruffle any feathers with a VIP. And that's certainly a fear-based reason for not
Sure.
speaking up.
Yeah.
And again, we understand why someone would be reluctant to speak up. But what goes along with the territory and being an association leader is having the courage to do just that. Because one of the rules in leading is we should treat like cases alike and unalike cases unalike. And so if you would speak up to a board member who wasn't a VIP for perhaps being involved in, what was it, trade violations or
Antitrust.
Antitrust issues, if we would have no compunction speaking up to a board member who wasn't a VIP, why wouldn't that apply to Mr. or Mrs. Big Shot? It would apply.
Sure.
And so I understand this is not the easiest thing to do, but sometimes the honorable thing to do is not the easy thing to do.
Gotcha. Before we finish here, it comes to me that some of the association executives might be sitting there thinking, "Okay, Rigsbee, who's this blowhard you got? What? Okay, so
hey, wait a minute, blowhard? Me a blowhard? What?
So
well, at least you're saying it to my face. At least
yeah,
you had
there
the
you go.
courage to say it. I mean,
so they're going, okay, the guy's a doctor. Big deal. Everybody's a doctor. So I just wanted to share with everybody what you have on your website. And so it's on the recording here. It says, Bruce has discussed ethical issues in business politics and the news on NBC Today, ABC's Good Morning America, CNBC's Fast Money and Power Lunch, Fox News Channel's O'Reilly Factor. That must have been really.
I need to take that. Thank you.
That must have been
needed
interesting.
to take that off.
No. Okay. Well, no, not that. Not that he got himself in hot water, but just to interview with him must be interesting. Wide range of programs on CNN, and in addition to your regular commentaries on Fortune, you're writing in the New York Times, Bloomberg, Business, Investors, Business Daily, Huffington Post, USA Today, In-Flight magazines. Man, you are all over the place, and so I believe, as we're talking, that you have the authority to speak on this topic. I just wanted to make sure that other people realize that you have the authority. And I got to say, for anybody listening to this, if people go to your website, theethicsguy.com, theethicsguy.com, if you go to your website, Bruce has got just a ton of videos of being interviewed, and you think he gets on my case here? Holy cow! I was watching him, duel it out, and I really enjoyed the interviews. You're not this sit back wet noodle guy that they throw stuff at and you go, well, whatever. You're like, back at him. So,
well, thank you for that, Ed.
Yeah,
and also, my goal is for when I end a discussion with someone, for them to leave not thinking, oh, he really got on my case, but wow, that was inspiring. And I see more than ever how important this is. And I want to rise to the challenge of doing these difficult things. And probably the reason I went into this line of work is because I struggle with this all the time, every day, over and over again. And this is not easy to do. It's probably some of the most difficult things to do. Finding the courage to speak up, to confront, if you will, a VIP. Very difficult to do. And yet, it must be done.
So Bruce, a lot, you know this already, but a huge number of trade associations and professional societies, have either their online newsletter, magazine, whatever, and many of them still have their printed. Do you ever do articles for associations on ethics if they request it?
I do. I'm happy to share. And in fact, I have a relationship with Forbes in which after my original piece for Forbes on business and ethics and leadership runs, after 5 days, I can have it published elsewhere. And so I sometimes will modify these columns and tailor them to the needs of a specific association. like mechanical contractors or peanut and tree nut processors. Or the cool thing, I wonder if you feel this way too, Ed, about what you do, is that having the privilege to speak to the most diverse group of people you can imagine. I mean, one day it's mayors in Western Australia, and the next day it's the CEOs of companies in Cairo. And I just feel so blessed to be able to go around the world and share my passion with people from every conceivable group, and to find that, in fact, as different as the cultures are and the associations are, the ethical issues that people wrestle with are exactly the same.
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. Now, Bruce. Okay, so we've got that you've got articles that association execs could use. All they have to do is what? Have their editor contact you?
Well, yes, what they shouldn't do is just take them off the Forbes website without my knowledge or consent. Someone wrote to me recently and said, I saw your ethics quiz and a PowerPoint someone was giving. Did you know that? And it amazes me that somebody would steal someone's ethics presentation. I don't get it. Why would they make an illegal PDF out of my ethics books?
Who knows?
Are you not seeing the disconnect between these two? So aside from that, just appropriating the material, yes, reach out to me. You can call me. May I give my phone number?
Yes, please.
917-593-1195. And that's my personal cell phone number.
Okay.
Please don't publicize that too widely. 917-593-1195. Happy to talk with you about any ethical issue you'd like.
That's great. When you talked about that, you made me think, okay, so for anybody, Bruce and I do belong to an association together, the National Speakers Association. And in our industry, it's kind of a joke. There's a story that was made very famous by Og Mandino about the starfish. And, it's been all over the place. And there was even a movie with Eddie Murphy. The movie was G, and he told the story. I won't say what association, but I was at an association event. It was in Alabama. And there was a woman speaking on ethics, and she, about 10 minutes into her presentation, said, well, I made up this little story for you to make a point. And she
said she made up the starfish story?
And I was sitting back there going,
now this gobsmacked.
There was like probably 200 or 300 people in the room. And I'm sitting in the back of the room, and I'm going, I don't believe I just saw what I saw. And I'll tell you honestly, I admit it. I just stayed quiet. It was so egregious. Bruce said, I didn't have a clue on what to do.
Right.
It was that egregious. It was that egregious.
The thing is, you could call her out on it in front of everyone, but I do worry about, the embarrassment factor and why take pot shots or harm someone publicly if you can raise the issue privately and accomplish the same objective. So I wonder if privately it would have been possible to just say, you know what, that starfish story, I think I've heard that before, maybe 10,000 times. I don't think you wrote that.
That probably would have been a good thing to do. Yeah, I didn't get to doing that, but that probably would have been a good thing to do.
So, but let's go back to what gets in the way of doing the right thing. Were you afraid to speak up? Were you just out of time with the effort? What was it that prevented you in retrospect?
Okay, I'll be very sincere. I was at a meeting where everybody was of a different ethnicity, race than me. There was maybe 2 people that looked like me.
Mm-hmm.
I felt because of being different ethnicity, race than the propensity of the meeting, it would probably be inappropriate and received wrong for me to do it because I was clearly an outsider. And so that was what held me up.
You just gave me a good title for an article I think I want to write for Forbes.
Really?
Ethics is colorblind.
Oh, that would be good because that would have been That would have been really helpful for me in that situation.
But
Yes.
so wait a minute. But I want to stay with this because this is really important. I think this could
You
actually.
want me? You want to make me look bad? You want to make me look bad on my own video?
It's like we were talking about last week that, you know, you go to a therapist and for 58 minutes you're blah blah blah, and you get up and you're out the door and you turn around and say, oh, one more thing, and in those last 2 minutes, that's where
Yeah.
the real meat is. But I wonder if you had mentioned this to someone who was of the culture of the majority of the group and apprised him or her of what you knew, and then the two of you may be gone to speak with this person, and then that other person would speak up so that you wouldn't run the risk of
Mm-hmm.
not being heard, which, by the way, I'm not entirely sure that's how you would have been perceived to had, you know, handled the right way. But
Mm-hmm.
could this other approach have worked maybe better?
It might have. The approach you're suggesting is an exact approach I took where there was a challenge with the cigar pig charity that I run, that you know of, that you participate in, and where there was a certain group that was not participating in helping a person of his or her group. And I went to a person of his or her group and asked for their help, saying that I can't say anything. And that person said, yes, I can say something. And they took care of it. It's interesting as we get back. I mean, this happened quite a while ago. I distinctly remember sitting there in the back room listening and being egregiously dumbfounded. Um, and you know, Bruce, maybe the second thing was maybe I just was being lazy. That could have been. That could have been I was
It
just
could
being
have
lazy.
been you have other things to do, and who's going to know if you don't speak up?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
and by the way, Ed, how long ago was this?
Oh, geez, this was in. Give me a second here. This was this is probably in the 90s.
And it's still with you.
Oh
Just
yeah.
think about that.
Oh yeah. 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 Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I'm just wondering, in retrospect, had you somehow done something rather than nothing, whatever that was, speaking up to the person directly, having somebody else do it, if you would think about that moment differently?
Wow. Yeah. You're putting your psychologist hat on. It might, because uh, within the National Speakers Association, I mean, it's just such a common thing that is the quintessential example of don't steal other people's material. and
Absolutely.
and and we joke about it, and there's even been contests on people telling that story differently, um, which is very funny. But I think it, in that situation, looking back, I was so dumbfounded.
Yes,
I
yes.
was so un at ease being the only person like me in the room, and I was there for a few days, so I'm kind of thinking time wasn't the issue. I'm trying to remember back because it's been quite a long time. I I think I didn't know how to deal with it. And something you said earlier, I think something you said earlier is key to this whole thing. So you said earlier that what we need to do is teach and train association executives and leaders on to have things to say so they have a muscle memory. So
Yes,
when they're
yes,
dumbfounded, as
yes,
I was, I
yes,
mean,
yes.
Brooks, I was totally blown out of the water. I'm sitting in the back like, are you know what, kidding me? And I was so dumbfounded that
Yes,
I just
yes.
didn't know. I was probably immobilized because I had no clue what to do.
And so to that point, you're in California, right, Ed?
Yes.
Many years ago, probably about the same time this story happened to you, I was studying with a Zen master, martial arts in California, and someone in the class said, uh, "Sir, how is it that you're able to be centered all the time?" And he said, "I'm not centered all the time. I get off center all the time, many, many times a day. The difference is, A, I know when I'm off center, and B, I know how to get back." And
Ah,
so what happened to you is you were thrown. You
sure.
were because you just weren't expecting. Just like when you're speaking with that father at the soccer game, you
Yeah.
were just so surprised that someone would be just so flagrantly dishonest,
Yeah.
and that it does throw you for a loop. And yet, if you practice, how would I, in retrospect, what would be
Yeah.
a good way to speak up? What would I say? practicing that, just like you and I practice for speeches. You know, we don't just give a speech blind. We go out there and having practiced it the night before in our hotel rooms.
Sure.
Practicing this sort of thing in a low-risk environment is a great way of rising to the challenge when it does happen, because, as you said before, this not only will happen at some point for association leadership, it's guaranteed to happen probably sooner than later.
So, Bruce, in addition to the sandwich effect, the compliment, criticism, compliment, which I very much liked, is there any other tip or two that you could throw at people? I mean, I realize that, you know, you want them to pay you to come in and share all this, but let's give a little bit away.
Yes. So the first thing, once people finish watching this lively conversation, which I've enjoyed quite a bit, by the way, the first thing they should do is go to their website and just see, where is our value statement? Is it very clear and obvious? Second, let's take a look at our job descriptions. Are we walking the talk? Are we looking for the people who embody the values we say we believe in? Probably. Now, the answer to the first one may be, oh yes, the values are very clear. It's on the third tab over from the top right, or more often than not, it's buried at the bottom of the homepage. But I guarantee you, your job descriptions are not riddled with discussions and references to high character employees, high character leadership. And that's task number one.
Got it.
Rewrite those job descriptions ASAP.
So, Bruce, you've written a couple books. If I'm not mistaken, Ethical Intelligence and the good ones, the 10 Critical Qualities of High Character Employees. So for trade association executives watching this, which book should they read first? I know they should read both, but which one should they read first?
I wrote Ethical Intelligence before the last one that you mentioned, and that presents 5 principles that are common to all association codes of conduct. And in fact, they're common really to all cultures and even all faiths. 5 basic principles: do no harm, make things better, respect others, be fair, and care. And so I show a variety of ways that you can put those principles into practice. So that might be a nice introduction to what it means to lead with ethical intelligence. And then I show how to hire people with those qualities, with those commitments. And so
where is the book available?
Oh, well, it's all over Amazon, Barnes & Noble.
Okay, so people can get it anywhere.
Anywhere.
Okay.
It's not self-published. It's actually by New World Library, which publishes Deepak Chopra's The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. So I'm pleased to say I'm in good company.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's impressive. And wow, very much so. Hey, you know, what can you say? You don't know your friends until you know your friends. Bruce, this is awesome. Let me just let us close this with, you know, what you would like to say, you know, looking at Mr., Ms., trade association, professional society, chief staff executive, what is the most important thing, number one, for them to hear? And number two, tell us again how they get a hold of you.
So the first thing that came to mind, Ed, was a poster that I saw in the manager's office at the Jack in the Box in San Antonio, Texas, in 1977, when I was working there, my first real job in high school. And the poster said, "Ships are safest when in their harbors, but that's not what ships are built for." I never forgot that. I mean, it's one of those corny Spencer's Gifts posters. I think it was a fellow named Shed who actually came up with that idea. But this is a great metaphor for association leaders. Yes, it's safe to sit back and let the VIP board member run roughshod over us, but is that the best way to lead this association? Is that high character leadership? Maybe not. So that's, I think, the overarching thought here. Ships are safest when in their harbors, but that's not what ships are built for. Call me anytime, 917-593-1195. I'm on LinkedIn. Just put in The Ethics Guy or go to my website, theethicsguy.com. I would love to help you any way I can.
And how many articles do you have in the article bank that association executives would have access to if they talk to you?
Well, so on my website, on the blog, I've republished the things I wrote for Fortune and Business Week and Forbes.
Okay.
So there are lots of things that I'd be happy to share and also customize for the
Great.
association, because you really do want to speak the language of that group and not just one size fits all.
Yeah. Hey, that's awesome. Everybody, Dr. Bruce Weinstein, Weinstein, I pronounced it wrong. And
often misspelled and mispronounced, just like Rupert Pupkin from The King of Comedy.
Yeah, it's funny. Like Rigsbee, everybody wants to put a Y at the end rather than the two E's. And
you know why? Because of that the dog from Henry Huggins.
Oh no, I don't remember that.
I think his name was Rigsbee.
Rigsbee.
That might be it, but
yeah.
So, but no one mangles your first name, Ed. That's easy enough. It's
no, but again, this is a generational comment, but people always remember it because of Mr. Ed, and then I always hear, "Oh, Wilbur." So
I don't know if millennials. Do you think millennials understand the Mr. Ed reference?
No, they look at me and go, "What?" I said, "Go watch it at Nick on Night." Nick on Night. So, hey, Bruce, again, thanks so much. I really, really appreciate this. I appreciate you.